What if a tiny dried flower bud, the kind sitting forgotten in your kitchen cabinet right now, could quietly rewire how your whole body works in just 7 days? I didn't believe it either, until it happened to me. Before we go further, I need your help for 10 seconds. If this story pulls you in even a little, tap that like button right now before you forget. It costs you nothing, but it tells me you want more stories like this one. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share is something most health channels won't touch. Now let's get into it. I want to be honest with you from the very first sentence. I did not start chewing cloves because some doctor told me to. I did not read a viral post promising a miracle. I picked up a jar of whole cloves from my spice rack on a random Sunday night because I couldn't sleep, and I remembered my grandmother used to chew on them when her stomach felt heavy after dinner. That's it. That was the entire reason. No expectations, no research. Just an old habit borrowed from someone I trusted. I had no idea that one small decision would turn into 7 of the strangest, most eye-opening days of my life. Let me set the scene properly, because context matters here. I was not a sick person. I was not desperate. I was simply a tired, slightly stressed mid-30s adult dealing with the usual quiet problems nobody talks about. Bloating after meals. Breath that never felt fully fresh, no matter how much I brushed. A jittery, restless feeling in the evenings that made it hard to wind down. Sugar cravings that hit like clockwork around 9 at night. None of these things were dramatic enough to see a doctor about. They were just background noise. The kind of discomfort you learn to live with because everyone seems to have some version of it. So on day 1, I chewed a single clove after dinner, just to see what would happen. I expected a strong, spicy taste, and nothing else. What I got was something completely different, and it confused me enough that I kept going the next day. And the day after that, until 7 days had quietly turned into an experiment I never planned to run. I remember sitting on my kitchen counter that first night, jar in hand, feeling a little silly about the whole thing. I wasn't filming anything. I wasn't tracking numbers in a spreadsheet. I was just a curious person chewing on a dried flower bud, half expecting nothing to happen at all. If you had told me that night that this tiny, almost forgettable decision would lead to 7 days of genuine surprise, I honestly would have laughed. Here's the part that genuinely shocked me, and the part I think you need to hear before anything else. The changes I noticed did not come from cloves being some powerful chemical bomb that destroys bacteria or melts away problems overnight. That is the story most videos tell you, and it is the story that makes people give up after 3 days when nothing dramatic happens. The real shift came from something far stranger and far more interesting. It came from what the simple act of chewing does to the conversation between your mouth and your brain. The clove was not the hero of this story. The chewing was. Stay with me, because once you understand this one idea, everything else about my 7 days will make complete sense, and you'll probably never look at chewing the same way again. There's a concept in physiology called the head phase response. Long before food ever reaches your stomach, your body starts preparing for it the moment you taste, smell, or even just chew something. Your brain is constantly listening for signals from your mouth, and when those signals arrive, it sends out instructions to the rest of your body, telling your stomach to release acid, telling your pancreas to prepare enzymes, telling your nervous system to shift into a calmer state. This entire system runs in the background of your life, every single day, almost completely ignored. Most of us chew so fast, so distracted, so disconnected, that we barely give this system a clear signal to work with. We eat in front of screens. We swallow without really tasting. We rush through meals like they're tasks to finish. And over years, that weak, blurry signal becomes the normal way our body receives information. Chewing a whole clove slowly, with intention, for a full minute or more, does something almost nobody does anymore. It sends an unmistakably loud, clear signal straight to that ancient communication system. And that, more than any chemical inside the clove itself, is what changed my body over 7 days. By day 2, I noticed something so small I almost dismissed it. My mouth was producing far more saliva than usual while I chewed, and a few minutes later that heavy bloated feeling I usually got after dinner was noticeably softer. Not gone completely, but softer. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just assumed it was a coincidence. It was not a coincidence. Saliva is not just water sitting in your mouth. It carries digestive enzymes that begin breaking down food before it ever reaches your stomach. It carries compounds that prepare your gut lining for what's coming. When you chew something intensely flavored and slightly warming like a clove, your salivary glands respond with a much stronger flow than they would for plain food. That flood of saliva was the very first domino. It primed my digestion before a single bite of dinner had even been swallowed. My stomach was no longer caught off guard. It was warned, prepared, and ready. By day 3, something happened that genuinely caught me off guard. My breath felt different. Not minty, not artificially fresh like mouthwash, but clean in a way that lasted for hours instead of fading after 20 minutes. I almost didn't trust it. I asked my partner directly if my breath smelled okay, expecting the usual polite shrug. Instead, they said it actually seemed better than normal. This made sense once I understood what was really happening. Bad breath that lingers no matter how much you brush is rarely just a brushing problem. It's often connected to bacteria living deep in the back of the tongue and throat, the kind of bacteria that thrive in a dry, low-oxygen environment. Cloves contain a compound that actively works against odor-causing bacteria, but the bigger shift came from that same flood of saliva I mentioned before. Saliva washes through the mouth, clears out trapped particles, and creates conditions that those smell-producing bacteria simply don't like. I wasn't masking a smell with something stronger. I was changing the actual environment where the smell was being created in the first place. By day 4, the surprises kept stacking. That tense, slightly crampy feeling I sometimes got after a heavier meal, the kind where your stomach feels like it's holding a fist, started showing up less often. When it did show up, it faded faster than usual. I want to be careful here, because this is not me telling you cloves cured anything. What I experienced felt like a gentle easing, not a dramatic fix. But it was consistent enough across multiple days that I couldn't ignore it. Cloves contain a natural compound called eugenol, and in the tiny amounts released slowly through careful chewing, it has a mild calming effect on the muscles of the digestive tract. Think of it less like a powerful drug and more like a soft hand gently relaxing a clenched fist. The key word here is tiny. This wasn't about swallowing a spoonful of clove oil, which can actually irritate the stomach lining. It was about a small, slow, saliva-diluted dose, delivered the way nature intended, through patient chewing rather than aggressive consumption. We're now past the surface level changes, and this is where things got genuinely interesting for me, because day 5 and 6 moved beyond digestion entirely and started touching something I didn't expect at all, my nervous system. Before I tell you what happened next, I want to pause for a second. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who actually cares about understanding your own body. That's rare, and I respect it. So do me a small favor. Drop a single word in the comments right now. Just type 7, so I know how many of you are still with me. It genuinely helps me understand who's paying attention, and it takes you 2 seconds. Now back to day 5. On day 5, in the evening, after a stressful day at work, I chewed my clove slowly, almost without thinking, the way you'd chew gum out of habit. About 10 minutes later, I noticed my shoulders had dropped. My jaw, which had been tightly clenched since the afternoon, had loosened on its own. My breathing had slowed down without me trying to slow it down. I sat there for a moment, genuinely confused, trying to figure out what had changed. Nothing in my day had improved. The stress was still there, but my body felt like it had quietly stepped out of fight mode. This is where the vagus nerve enters the story. And honestly, once I understood this part, the entire 7 days finally made sense. The vagus nerve is the longest nerve running from your brain stem down into your gut. It is the main highway of your parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest, calm, and repair. Slow rhythmic chewing is one of the simplest, most direct ways to stimulate this nerve. Each deliberate bite, each pause, each moment of chewing instead of swallowing food whole sends a steady signal up that highway, telling your body it is safe to relax. Most of us live in a state of constant low-level alertness without even realizing it. We eat fast, we scroll while we eat, we swallow stress along with our food. The vagus nerve rarely gets a clear, calm signal to work with. A whole clove, with its strong taste and slightly tough texture, forces you to slow down. You cannot chew it absent-mindedly the way you might chew soft bread. It demands attention. And that demand, that forced slowness, turned out to be the real medicine. By day 6, I noticed I was falling asleep faster than usual. Not dramatically, not like flipping a switch, but the restless, wired feeling that usually kept me scrolling on my phone until midnight had softened into something closer to normal tiredness. I chewed my clove right after dinner, the same way I had every night that week, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the urge to reach for something sweet afterward. That craving disappearance deserves its own explanation because it surprised me the most. The flavor of a clove is unlike almost anything else in your kitchen. It is sweet, sharp, slightly bitter, and warming all at once, hitting your tongue with an intensity that lingers. That intensity sends a powerful signal to the reward centers in your brain, the same centers that light up when you eat something sugary. In a strange way, chewing a clove after a meal told my brain that eating was finished, completely and satisfyingly finished. The usual nagging voice, asking for something sweet, simply had less to say. I wasn't fighting my cravings with willpower. I was quietly switching off the signal that created them in the first place. There was something else happening that week, too. Something I only connected later when I started reading about why this calming effect mattered so much for the rest of my body. When you're constantly stressed, your body releases a hormone called cortisol, and cortisol has a quiet, often invisible side effect. It interferes with how well your cells respond to insulin, the hormone responsible for managing your blood sugar after meals. So when chewing slowly calms your nervous system and lowers that background stress response. It isn't just making you feel relaxed in the moment. It's giving your body a better chance to handle sugar and energy from food without the usual spike and crash. I didn't measure my blood sugar that week, I'll be honest with you, but I noticed I wasn't hit with that familiar afternoon energy crash nearly as often, the one that usually sends me straight for coffee or something sugary just to function. It's a small thing on paper, but if you've ever lived with that 2 o'clock wall of exhaustion, you know exactly how much it actually changes a day. Something even less obvious was happening too, something I didn't expect a kitchen spice to ever touch. Saliva isn't just there to help you digest food. It's actually part of your immune system. It carries antibodies and protective enzymes designed to catch invaders right at the entry point of your body, your mouth. By chewing something that dramatically increases saliva flow day after day, I was essentially giving that first line of immune defense more raw material to work with. It's a small, local action, but your mouth is one of the busiest doorways pathogens use to get into your body. Strengthening the guard at that doorway, even slightly, is not a small thing. I also noticed, almost as a side note, that my face felt less puffy in the mornings by the end of the week, especially around my jaw. This one makes sense once you think about it physically. Chewing something firm and fibrous repeatedly is essentially exercise for the muscles in your jaw and face. That movement increases blood flow to the area, the same way moving your arm increases blood flow to your bicep. More circulation in that region can support healthier looking tissue and reduce that stagnant, heavy feeling some of us wake up with. It's not dramatic. It's not a facelift. But it's real, and it's something nobody told me to expect. There's a reason I think this practice matters even more as we get older, and it's worth pausing on before we move to day 7. As we age, the signals running between our brain and our digestive organs tend to become quieter, less precise, and easier to disrupt by stress. Medication or simply years of rushed eating habits can disrupt these signals over time. Many of the digestive complaints people quietly accept after 50, the bloating, the sluggishness, the unpredictable gut, the restless nights, aren't always caused by something newly broken. Often, they're caused by a communication system that has simply grown faint over decades of being ignored. A practice this small, this deliberate, acts almost like a volume knob, turning that faint signal back up to a level your body can actually respond to clearly. That's not something a pill can replicate, because it isn't a chemical problem. It's a clarity problem. By day 7, all of these small threads finally tied together into one realization that genuinely changed how I think about health. Your mouth and your gut are not separate systems, pretending to live in the same body. They are directly connected through nerve pathways that scientists now call the gut-brain axis. Every signal you send from your mouth, whether it's calm and rhythmic or rushed and chaotic, travels down that axis and shapes how your entire digestive system behaves for hours afterward. A tense, hurried mouth sends a tense, hurried signal. A slow, deliberate, attentive mouth sends a completely different message, one of safety, readiness, and calm. This is the part that genuinely shocked me. The twist I never saw coming when I picked up that jar of cloves on a random Sunday night. I assumed that any benefit I felt would come from some powerful chemical inside the clove itself, killing bacteria, blasting away toxins, fixing something broken. But looking back across all 7 days, I'm convinced that most of what changed in my body came from something far simpler and far more overlooked. It came from the method itself, the slowness, the attention, the repeated, deliberate signal sent from my mouth to my brain night after night for an entire week. The clove wasn't performing some chemical miracle. It was giving my nervous system a clear, unmistakable instruction that most modern eating habits never provide anymore. Think about how rarely you actually chew anything slowly anymore. Smoothies, soft bread, fast food, soups. Everything in modern life is designed to be swallowed quickly. We've engineered slowness out of eating entirely, and in doing so, we've quietly disconnected ourselves from a communication system that used to run smoothly. The clove simply forced that connection back open, one stubborn, fibrous bite at a time. If someone in your life still struggles with bloating after every meal, or lies awake at night feeling wired for no reason, this video might genuinely help them. Send it to them right now, before you forget, the way I almost forgot to keep chewing past day 2. Sometimes the most useful thing you can do for someone you care about is share something this simple. Now let's talk about exactly how I did this, so you can try it safely yourself. The method I used was simple, almost embarrassingly so. Each evening, usually right after my main meal, I took one single whole clove and placed it in my mouth. I did not crush it instantly between my back teeth, the way you might crack a piece of candy. I chewed it slowly, deliberately, letting the flavor build instead of rushing past it. This took anywhere from 60 seconds to a couple of minutes, depending on how distracted I was that night. Once the fibrous remains broke down enough, I either spit them out or swallowed them, which is perfectly fine in such a tiny quantity. There's no need to force it down if it feels uncomfortable. I didn't do this every single day without thinking. I did it most evenings, usually around 5 or 6 times across the week, mainly after meals or during moments when I noticed my body tightening up. I avoided chewing more than one clove at a time. More is not better here. A single clove, chewed slowly, delivers everything this practice has to offer. 2 or 3 at once simply increases the risk of irritation without adding any extra benefit, and that's a mistake a lot of people make. I also made a point of never doing this on a completely empty stomach first thing in the morning, especially not every single day. The concentrated compounds in cloves can be a bit much for an empty, unprotected stomach lining if you overdo it. Listening to your body here matters far more than following a rigid rule. If you ever feel a burning sensation, stop immediately. If you have any open sores or ulcers in your mouth, skip this entirely until they heal, because cloves' natural compounds can sting broken skin. And if you're pregnant, nursing, or managing any existing digestive condition, it's always worth a quick conversation with your doctor. There's one warning I want to say clearly, because I take this seriously, and I think you should too. If you are taking prescription blood-thinning medication, talk to your doctor before adding this habit into your routine. Cloves have a mild natural effect on blood clotting, and while a single chewed clove is unlikely to cause problems, anyone on medication deserves a real conversation. Please don't skip that step. Your safety matters more than any habit, no matter how interesting it sounds. Before I tell you how this whole experiment changed the way I think about my own body, I want to ask you something honestly. Have you ever tried this yourself, even once, just chewing a whole clove slowly instead of using it the usual way in cooking? Type yes or no in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to know if your experience matched mine, or if your body responded in some completely different way. Looking back now, weeks after that random Sunday night, I keep coming back to the same thought. None of what happened to me required money, a prescription, a complicated routine, or a single trip to a store I hadn't already visited 100 times. It required a spice jar that had been sitting in my cabinet for years, completely ignored, waiting for me to actually use it the way people once did. My grandmother wasn't doing some advanced biohack when she chewed cloves after dinner. She was simply doing something patient and deliberate. That's what stays with me the most. We spend so much energy searching for the next breakthrough, when sometimes the answer was never about adding something new. Sometimes it's about slowing down long enough to let your own body finish a conversation it's been trying to have with you for years. Your nervous system, your gut, your immune response, none of these systems are broken. They're simply starved of clear signals. 7 days of one small clove, chewed slowly, didn't transform me into a different person, but it pulled back the curtain on something far more valuable than a quick fix. It showed me how much my body had been quietly waiting this whole time for me to simply pay attention, not push harder, not consume more. I think about how easy it would have been to give up after day 2 when nothing dramatic had happened yet, but the body rarely shouts when it's healing, it whispers. And those 7 days taught me to actually listen for the whisper instead of waiting for the shout. So here's what I'll leave you with. The next time you feel like your body needs something dramatic, pause for a second and ask yourself a different question. What is the smallest, slowest, most overlooked thing I could give my attention to right now? Sometimes the most shocking discoveries aren't hiding in some rare ingredient. They're sitting quietly in a jar on your kitchen shelf, waiting for you to listen. If this story made you think differently, that's exactly why I made it. Subscribe if you want more honest experiments like this one, and I'll see you in the next one.